New Mexico, 1883. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of the frontier town. Horses stamped impatiently, their hooves stirring clouds of dirt, while townsfolk crowded around the makeshift auction platform, squinting through the heat haze. The air smelled of sweat, leather, and the faint tang of wood smoke drifting from nearby cabins. On the platform, beside crates of tools and a few restless cattle, a figure stood apart. A coarse sack covered her head, concealing her face, yet her posture suggested both fear and quiet defiance. The auctioneer, a wiry man with a voice that cut through the murmurs, raised his gavel. "Next item," he called, as townspeople exchanged puzzled glances. Some whispered nervously to their neighbors, wondering why such a mysterious woman would be put up for sale like any other possession in this harsh, unforgiving land. Cole, a lumberjack with broad shoulders and hands calloused from years of swinging axes, stood at the edge of the crowd. His eyes, tired yet sharp, scanned the platform with curiosity and caution. He had seen many strange things in his 35 years, wandering the forests and hills, but nothing quite like this. Something about the woman's stillness drew him in, a silent plea beneath the coarse sack that resonated with his own loneliness. Cole had spent years chopping timber, building cabins and mending fences, yet companionship had always eluded him. No family, no close friends, only the quiet whisper of the pines and the steady rhythm of his axe. The murmurs of the crowd barely registered in his mind. With a deliberate step forward, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled $2 bill. The gesture felt small, almost insignificant, yet it was all he had to offer. The auctioneer's gavel hit the platform with a sharp crack, drawing every eye. $2, sold to the gentleman at the edge, he announced, his voice echoing across the dusty square. A ripple of astonishment ran through the crowd. $2? A merchant whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. For her? Are you out of your mind? Cole ignored the chatter, stepping forward with steady hands. He reached out and guided the woman carefully down from the platform. Her body stiffened at first, as if unsure whether to trust him, yet she followed without protest. The sack rustled softly as he removed it halfway, revealing just the edge of her dark hair, her eyes still hidden, her expression veiled by a mixture of fear and curiosity. The murmurs of the crowd faded behind him as he led her toward the shadow of a nearby building, offering the first small act of kindness in what would become a life-altering encounter. The streets of New Mexico seemed emptier once they left the auction square. Cole's steps were measured, his heart beating faster than he expected. He could feel the tension emanating from her, subtle yet persistent, like the hum of a trapped bird. "Don't be afraid," he said quietly. Glancing at her through the folds of the sack, she tilted her head slightly, a faint nod acknowledging his words, though her eyes betrayed no emotion. Cole thought about the years of solitude he had endured, the nights spent by a fire, listening to the wind howl across the canyon, the endless hours cutting timber in silence. Something about her presence stirred a warmth he hadn't felt in years, a spark that neither money nor luck could have ever offered. In a world as rough and unyielding as the frontier, human connection was rare, precious and fragile. And yet here it was, offered unbidden in the form of this mysterious woman. As they reached the edge of town, the wooden cabins cast long shadows over the dusty road. Cole led her past stacks of firewood and empty barrels, careful to avoid drawing attention. She moved with a quiet grace, each step measured, as if wary of the world around her. He could sense her hesitancy, but also her resilience, a strength forged in hardship. "My name is Cole," he said gently, hoping to establish some trust. The woman remained silent, her head lowered, but there was a flicker of acknowledgement in the way her shoulders shifted. The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon in streaks of gold and crimson. In that fleeting moment, surrounded by the vast emptiness of the frontier, Cole felt a sense of destiny. Perhaps this meeting was not chance, but fate, a rare intersection of two lonely lives in a harsh, indifferent land. By the time they reached the edge of his cabin, a small structure of rough-hewn logs with smoke curling from the chimney, the woman had grown slightly more relaxed. Cole opened the door and gestured for her to enter. The warmth of the interior contrasted sharply with the dry heat outside. The scent of pine and smouldering fire filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of dried herbs and worn leather. He offered her a seat on a rough wooden bench, and she hesitated, then sat cautiously, as if testing the safety of this small sanctuary. Cole stood nearby, hands resting on his belt, silently observing. He could sense a story behind her eyes, a life filled with trials, fear, and resilience. And in that quiet, flickering light, he knew their lives were about to change forever. The sun had finally dipped below the horizon, leaving the town cloaked in twilight. Shadows stretched across the dusty road, and the distant howl of a coyote echoed through the canyons. Cole sat beside her, offering a small piece of bread and a cup of water. Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted it, the faintest hint of gratitude in her gesture. "You're safe now," Cole said softly. "I won't let anyone hurt you." She looked up, her eyes meeting his for the first time without the sack, and he saw a mixture of caution and hope. In that moment, amidst the solitude and danger of the frontier, an unspoken bond began to form. Two lives previously defined by loneliness were now intertwined, and neither would ever be the same again. The cabin was quiet, save for the gentle crackle of the fire, casting long shadows across the rough-hewn walls. Cole carefully removed the coarse sack that had hidden her face all day. Mary blinked against the sudden light, her eyes wide, glimmering with a mixture of defiance, curiosity, and something fragile, hope, perhaps. The air between them was thick with unspoken questions and tentative trust. Cole studied her features, noting the dirt smudges on her cheeks, the slight tremor in her hands, and the way her shoulders stiffened at every sudden noise. "It's all right," he said softly. "You're safe here." She nodded but did not speak immediately, as though testing whether this promise of safety was genuine. He sensed her wariness. It mirrored his own, built from years of solitude and loss. "I'm Mary," she whispered finally, her voice low but steady. The simplicity of the name carried weight, a declaration of existence in a world that had treated her as less than human. Cole felt a jolt of something unfamiliar. Tenderness, perhaps, or recognition of shared loneliness. He offered a small smile, one that did not carry judgment, only acknowledgement. "Cole," he replied, introducing himself fully for the first time. They sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the rhythm of the fire and the distant calls of coyotes echoing through the hills. In that quiet, two strangers began to understand each other, their souls brushing against the possibility of companionship. The frontier was merciless, yet in this tiny cabin, a seed of connection had taken root. Cole set about preparing a modest supper, humming softly under his breath, while Mary watched, unsure how to participate. He handed her a tin cup of water and a small slice of bread. Hesitant, she took it with both hands, eyes meeting his briefly in a flicker of gratitude. There was an odd comfort in these mundane acts, the first shared moments of domesticity between two people who had previously existed only in isolation. Cole realized that survival on the frontier required more than strength. It required trust, collaboration, and courage, not only in facing the elements, but in letting another human in. Mary's presence illuminated the cabin, bringing warmth beyond the firelight, a spark neither of them had expected. Night deepened, stretching its shadows across the hills outside. Cole guided Mary to a small bed in the corner, draping a worn blanket over her shoulders. She studied him carefully, searching for any hint of deception or cruelty, but found none. "You don't have to speak if you don't want," he said, sensing her reluctance to reveal too much too soon. She exhaled slowly, a faint smile touching her lips. Words were heavy in this life, often dangerous. Yet the simplest of exchanges, a name, a shared meal, a gesture of care, had begun to create trust. By the flickering glow, their silhouettes merged with the shadows, two figures learning the contours of a shared existence for the first time. The following days were spent in quiet routine. Cole taught Mary how to chop wood safely, how to start a fire with flint and tinder, and how to tend the small garden he had planted outside the cabin. She, in turn, shared small bits of her knowledge, mending torn clothes, cooking simple meals, and navigating the treacherous trails to town for supplies. Their relationship unfolded gradually, built on mutual respect and the understanding that survival was a partnership. The frontier was unforgiving, yet amidst the harsh winds and scorching sun, two hearts grew closer. Mary's laughter, soft and musical, began to fill the cabin, a sound that had been absent from Cole's life for far too long. It was in these ordinary moments that love quietly began to bloom. One evening, as a storm rolled over the distant hills, lightning illuminating the sky in jagged bursts, Cole and Mary sat together near the hearth. Rain pelted the roof, drumming a relentless rhythm, and the wind howled through gaps in the log walls. Cole reached out, brushing a lock of hair from Mary's face, an unspoken gesture of tenderness. She did not recoil. Instead, she allowed the touch, recognizing the bond that had grown between them. They spoke little that night, words unnecessary when presence alone conveyed understanding. In that dimly lit cabin, against the fury of the storm outside, the seeds of trust had matured into something stronger. Affection, the first fragile tendrils of love in a world that had shown them little mercy. As weeks turned to months, the cabin became more than a shelter. It became a home. Cole and Mary settled into a rhythm of life that was simple yet profound. They shared chores, laughter, and stories of past hardships. Mary's guarded nature softened, revealing resilience, wit, and an unspoken strength that matched Cole's rugged determination. Each evening, they would sit by the fire, the silence between them filled with comfort rather than tension. Cole realized that the $2 gamble at the auction had led to far more than he could have imagined. Fate had delivered not only a companion, but a partner, a confidant, and a love neither had expected to find on the wild frontier. Finally, one golden sunset, Cole took Mary's hand in his, feeling the roughness of her palms against his own. "Mary," he began, his voice steady, "I can't promise the world, but I can promise we'll face it together." She met his gaze, a smile breaking across her face, luminous and unguarded. "I'll stand by you," she replied softly. And in that moment, the frontier outside seemed less cruel, the winds less biting, and the nights less lonely. The auction, the sack, the $2 gamble, all had been steps leading to this union of hearts. Against the odds, love had found a way. Together, Cole and Mary faced the vast, untamed world ahead, bound by trust, resilience, and a quiet, enduring love.